Hey Freedom Church, my name is Nu and I live in Cape Town, South Africa, and it's my pleasure to share with you some thoughts today on Psalm 126. I'm going to split it down into just 3 simple sections and then with 3 simple next steps to do in your devotional today. So I'm going to jump straight in and start by reading the first couple of verses. So Psalm 126, verse 1 says this: "When the Lord brought back his exiles to Jerusalem, it was like a dream. We were filled with laughter, we sang for joy. The other nations said, 'What amazing things the Lord has done for them.' Yes, the Lord has done amazing things. What joy." So that was verses 1 to 3. What this is saying is, this first part of this psalm is remembering the incredible goodness of God, the miracles that he has done. Exile represented distance, separation from God, captivity, despair, rejection, it distance from the presence of God. That's like the worst. So it's saying, hey, remember when we were brought out of our worst situation and we were brought into Jerusalem, which represented connection with God, relationship, closeness with God, which is the end goal. So it's saying, hey, remember when God did it. Remember how it felt. Remember the rejoicing and the joy of restoration with our God. Even the other nations noticed, even the other nations looked and saw what joy and what answers to prayer. And so this is actually a beautiful way of starting this psalm. It's actually just like a prayer. It's broken down into like a prayer. So starting with remembering the goodness of God, his power, his might, and rejoicing in how it felt. And I think it's a really important thing to do, because as humans, we can quickly forget the goodness of God and the answers we've already had. So starting from a place today of remembering who God is in the worst of our situations and who he has been in the past is such a beautiful, refreshing way to start our prayer time, with that incredible gratitude. And so then the second part, jumping on in, is a simple prayer. So verse 4 says, "Restore our fortunes, Lord, as streams in the desert." And this is a simple prayer. It's one verse, a simple prayer of asking, restore, do it again. God, do it again. You've done it, do it again. But then also recognizing who he is. Lord, as streams renew the desert. Lord, as streams renew the desert. You've done it before. You are all powerful. Only you can make streams in the desert, recognizing the sovereignty of the Lord in this situation as well. And then the third part is the promise and the declaration. And it says this: "Those who plant in tears will harvest with shouts of joy. They weep as they go out to plant their seed, but they will sing as they return with harvest." And my picture as I read these verses is like going out with a handful of grain. This is all we've got. This is all we've got. I've been crying, because actually if you plant what you've got nothing to eat. Like, there's a real simplicity in this verse, but a real beauty. Like, actually representing, I'm going to go out, I'm going to pour out what I do have generously. I'm going to give beyond my means. I'm going to give because the promise of God, pause, because of what he has done, because who he is in my situation, an Almighty, and because of his promise now, actually as I pour out and as he waters like streams renew the desert, actually the promise is I'm going to reap a harvest of joy and of rejoicing. And so my simple next steps for this today is to go read it over, chew it over yourself as well, and write down, make note. Remember the goodness of God. Remember the prayers answered before. Remember what it felt like to be far from him and when he brought you close. Maybe that is when you met Jesus. Maybe it's a worship time where you felt the presence of God. Remember his goodness and what it felt like, because that stirs faith in us, because he who was yesterday, he's the same today and he's the same forever. And so by remembering what it feels like to be in connection with him, community with him, that really spurs us on. So then prayer, simple prayer. Yesterday we heard a powerful message on humility. If you haven't seen it, it's a really great message and I'd encourage you to go and watch that on YouTube. But the prayer is a simple hands open prayer that says, what are you asking him? Hands open, because you're also going to recognize who he is in that. God, only you can answer this prayer. So coming to him with humility, opening hands, and recognizing his sovereignty in it. And then finally, asking God, what have I got in my hands that I can sow? That generosity, what can I give? Even if it's going to feel like I'm sowing in tears, like I'm giving out, it feels like I don't have anything to give. that generosity, the promise that comes with that is the harvest of plenty and of joy. So those are my thoughts on this. It's a beautiful psalm, and I would encourage you to read it a couple of times, make notes in those 3 parts as well, and to see what it says to yourself. My prayer is that this really blesses you today, and that it is also a beautiful way to just simply pray. Remember his goodness. What is your ask? Who is he to you today? And the promise, as you sow out generously, that action that you take, his blessing is attracted to that action.